Welcome back. Today we're venturing into the heart of the ancient world, where empires rose and fell. Picture this. A king, Cambyses II, mighty Persian emperor, dreams of total conquest. He's already taken Egypt, but he wants more. So he sends this huge army, 50,000 soldiers, deep into the western desert. Their mission, destroy an oracle that defied him, and then, poof, they vanished. Just gone. No trace. 50,000 soldiers, swallowed by the desert. It's one of history's great mysteries, baffling people for literally millennia. So was it divine anger, a freak natural disaster? Or is there a truth buried out there somewhere?
Well, the story really kicks off around 525 BCE. Cambyses II, he's the son of Cyrus the Great, a really significant figure. He'd just conquered Egypt, made it a Persian satrapy, basically a province, a major victory. But his ambition didn't stop at the Nile. He had his sights set on the Oracle of Amun, way out at the Siwa Oasis.
Why the oracle specifically?
It was a powerful symbol, politically and religiously. And apparently, it had issued a prophecy predicting his downfall. Cambyses wasn't having that. So to silence it, he sends this massive expeditionary force right into the desert.
And that's exactly why you asked us to unpack this whole thing. We're going to dig into the accounts, the science, the controversies, see what we can figure out about this legendary lost army. Okay, so the big source, the one everyone starts with, is Herodotus, the father of history, right? Writing maybe a century after it supposedly happened.
That's right. And Herodotus gives us this incredibly vivid, almost cinematic scene. He says, the army marched for 7 days from Thebes, reached the El Karga Oasis, okay, and then they set off towards Siwa. And then according to him, about halfway there, disaster, he writes, a great south wind arose, bringing with it masses of sand. It buried them all, and they disappeared without a trace.
Wow, just buried the entire army.
The entire army, supplies, animals, everything just swallowed by this monster sandstorm. That's the image Herodotus leaves us with.
It's incredibly dramatic. But, Herodotus, writing 100 years later, how much stock could we put in that exact detail? The instantaneous burial by one storm. With maybe, adding some flair.
That's the million-dollar question, isn't it? Herodotus is fundamental, but yeah, he definitely blended fact with local stories, maybe moral lessons. It's possible that the dramatic sandstorm was a convenient explanation for a total loss, or maybe a warning about hubris, about challenging the gods or nature. But even if you doubt the single massive storm event, the Western Desert itself, it's absolutely brutal, a genuine adversary.
Right, so you're saying forget the Hollywood sandstorm for a second. The desert alone could have done it. What were the real killers out there for an army that size?
Precisely. Think about it. The sheer logistics are staggering. Water for 50,000 men plus animals across hundreds of miles of baking desert. Dehydration, heat stroke. Those would be constant threats chipping away at them. Water supplies could run out, or they could miss a crucial well. And navigation. It's largely featureless terrain, shifting dunes. Getting lost, even with guides, was terrifyingly easy. A wrong turn could be fatal.
Okay. And what about actual sandstorms, even if not the bury everyone instantly kind?
Oh, regular sandstorms are bad enough. Maybe not instant burial, but they cause blindness, disorientation, suffocation. They destroy tents, scatter supplies, foul water sources. You lose all sense of direction. And then there's the human element. Desert raiders, nomadic groups knew the terrain, and an exhausted, struggling army. They'd be a prime target.
So really, it sounds like a slow, grinding disintegration is maybe more plausible than one big whoosh.
It does seem more likely from a practical standpoint.
Yeah.
Death by 1,000 cuts, you could say. Thirst, heat, getting lost, smaller storms, maybe ambushes.
Which makes finding evidence even harder, I guess.
Yes, exactly. From an archaeological perspective, it's a nightmare. The desert doesn't preserve things neatly. Sands shift constantly, burying things one decade, uncovering them the next. Artifacts get scattered over huge areas. Organic materials like bodies, they disintegrate quickly or get scavenged. Finding a concentrated site proving the army's fate is, well, incredibly difficult, like finding that needle in 1,000 shifting haystacks.
Yeah, people keep looking, right? The story's too compelling. Especially with modern tech. What about the searches in more recent times?
Oh, yes. The search absolutely continued. It became something of a modern obsession. In the early 20th century, you had figures like Prince Kamal el-Din and Laszlo Almazy. Yes, the English patient was based on, he searched too. Also, a British officer, Ord Wingate, looked in 1933. None of them found anything conclusive.
But then things ramped up a bit later. I remember hearing about a big expedition in the 80s.
You're probably thinking of the Gary S. Chaffetz expedition, 1983-84. That was a serious effort. Sponsored by Harvard, National Geographic, the Egyptian Geological Survey. Big budget, $250,000 back then. They had, 20 Egyptian geologists used an ultralight aircraft for aerial survey, ground-penetrating radar. The works. They focus on a 100-square-kilometer zone southwest of Siwa Oasis.
Okay, so with all that firepower, what did they find? Did they crack it?
Well, they found something interesting, but maybe not the army. They located about 500 tumuli burial mounds, but digging into them, no artifacts. They did find some bone fragments.
Ah, okay. So human remains.
Yes, but when they used thermoluminescence dating, the fragments dated to around 1500 BC. That's about 1,000 years before Cambyses, so not the Lost Army.
1,000 years too early. Wow. Anything else?
One other intriguing find. In a cave near Siwa Oasis, they found a recumbent winged sphinx made of oolitic limestone, and it looked Persian in style.
A Persian sphinx. That sounds promising. But still, not the army itself. And didn't something strange happen to Chafetz after the expedition?
Ah, yes. This is where the story gets kind of wild and sheds light on the complexities of doing this kind of work. When Chafetz got back to Cairo, he was actually arrested. The charge, smuggling an airplane into Egypt.
Smuggling? But he had sponsors. Permission.
Exactly. He had written permission. But he was still detained, interrogated for a day. The charges were eventually dropped, but only after he agreed to donate his ultralight aircraft to the Egyptian government.
He had to give them the plane.
Yep. And apparently that same aircraft is now displayed in the Egyptian War Museum in Cairo, labeled as belonging to an Israeli spy.
No way. That's unbelievable. So it just shows how tangled these things can get with modern politics.
It really does. It's a bizarre footnote, but a telling one about the potential pitfalls beyond just the desert sands.
Okay, so after Chafetz's adventure,
Yeah.
did the search continue into the 2000s?
It did. In the summer of 2000, there was a report from a Helwan University geological team. They were actually out there looking for petroleum, but they claimed to have stumbled upon textile fragments, bits of metal that looked like weapons, and human remains, all of which they believed could belong to the Lost Army.
Okay, that sounds promising again. What came of it?
Well, the Egyptian Supreme Council of Antiquities announced they'd investigate. But then silence. No official findings or further information were ever released publicly.
Huh. Another dead end, it seems. Anyone else make a claim?
Yes, probably the most publicized claim in recent years came in November 2009 from two Italian brothers, Angelo and Alfredo Castiglione. They announced they'd found human remains, bronze weapons, arrowheads, even horse bits near Siwa Oasis that they believed were definitive proof of the army.
The Castiglione brothers, right? I remember that generating headlines. But wasn't there quite a bit of controversy surrounding their findings?
There absolutely was. A lot of skepticism, actually. For starters, they presented their findings primarily through a documentary film, not in peer-reviewed academic journals, which is the standard scientific process.
That always raises eyebrows.
It does. And their background didn't help. In the 1970s, they produced several controversial films often labeled shockumentaries. So their credibility was already questioned in some circles. Plus, the head of Egypt's Supreme Council of Antiquities at the time, the very well-known Zahi Hawass, publicly and strongly refuted their claims.
What did Hawass say?
He called their claims unfounded and misleading. He stated flatly that the objects they showed were not evidence of the Lost Army and pointed out that the brothers didn't even have permission to excavate in that area.
Okay, so that throws a lot of cold water on their discovery. It really emphasizes the need for rigorous method and transparency in archaeology.
Precisely. Sensational claims need extraordinary, verifiable proof presented through proper channels.
So we have Herodotus's dramatic storm, the harsh reality of the desert, and these contested modern finds. But is there another possibility entirely? Something that doesn't involve a storm at all?
Yes, and this is a really significant alternative theory that's gained traction more recently. It comes from Olaf Kaper, an Egyptologist at Leiden University. Based on his own excavation work at the Dakla Oasis, Kaper argued in 2015 that the army wasn't wiped out by a natural disaster.
Okay, so what does he think happened?
Kaper proposes that Cambyses' army was actually ambushed, fought, and defeated by Egyptian forces led by a rebel pharaoh named Petubastis III.
A military defeat. Not lost, but defeated. That changes everything.
It completely reframes the narrative. Kaper suggests that this Petubastis mounted a significant rebellion against the Persians during Cambyses' reign.
So, if they were defeated in battle, where does the Sandstorm story come from? Why would Herodotus report that?
Well, according to Kaper's theory, Petubastis was eventually defeated himself, but by Cambyses' successor, Darius the Great. And Darius wanting to maintain the image of Persian invincibility and erase the memory of this embarrassing defeat and the rebel pharaoh. He might have invented the Sandstorm story.
A deliberate cover-up. Wow.
Yeah.
Propagated by Darius, picked up later by Herodotus.
Potentially, yes. It would serve to remove Petubastis from the historical record and explain the army's disappearance without admitting a major military failure. It's a fascinating theory because it turns the legend into an act of political spin.
It's a stark reminder that history is often shaped by those in power. What we read isn't always the full story. Okay, so bringing this all together, the legend of Cambyses' Lost Army, it's clearly more than just an old story. It touches on, nature's power, the limits of empire, the pull of a great unsolved mystery.
Absolutely. We've got these distinct possibilities laid out.
Yeah.
Herodotus' dramatic, catastrophic sandstorm. Then there's the perhaps more mundane but equally deadly slow attrition, the army just falling apart due to the sheer brutality of the desert environment. And now, Kecker's theory. A military defeat deliberately hidden by a fabricated story, a historical cover-up. And the key thing connecting all this is the persistent lack of definitive, unambiguous archaeological proof. That absence is what keeps the mystery alive and so potent.
It really does. Whether they're buried under dunes somewhere or their remains were scattered and erased by conflict and time. The fate of those 50,000 soldiers just echoes, doesn't it? Shows that even now, with satellites and radar and everything, the desert holds its secrets. History still has these vast, silent expanses. Maybe, in a strange way, the army's very absence, its status as lost, is what grants it this kind of immortality, forever wandering out there in the sands. So thinking about this enduring legend, despite the shaky sources, the lack of proof, what does its power tell us about ourselves, about our fascination with these great historical unknowns, and maybe the kinds of stories we want to believe?